Hello guys, welcome back to my channel. Before we jump into this video, I just want to quickly apologize for not posting any Lost Sword content lately. I was pretty sick and I couldn't really work on videos, but hopefully I'm back now. And for today's video, we're going to talk about my queen Morgana. Morgana's original form is a middle row holy mage DPS slash support, and I'm not even exaggerating here, she's insane. And you might be wondering why is she so strong? Well, it mostly comes down to her passives and her ultimate, which has some absolutely absurd damage multipliers. So let's break it down. First, let's start with her second passive, since that one is pretty straightforward. At level 3, it gives Morgana 56% attack and 9% crit chance, which is already very solid for both damage and her scaling. Now, her first passive is where things get crazy. On the surface, it gives your allies additional damage and crit resistance, which is nice, but that's not even the main reason this passive is broken. The real value comes from the 6 seconds cooldown reduction at the start of the battle. If you didn't know, characters normally start fight with half of their cooldowns already charged. Morgana pushed this even further by cutting another 6 seconds right at the beginning. What this means is that Morgana and her teammates can start spamming skills almost immediately. She literally starts the fight with her skill ready, and the same goes for her supports and DPS units on her team. This is especially disgusting in PvP. If you run her with characters like Belzy, Palamedes, and Neobidi, the moment the fight starts, you can just nuke the entire team before they even get to play. One important thing to keep in mind though, the 6 seconds cooldown reduction only happens once, right at the start of the battle. It doesn't keep applying through the entire fight, but even though it's still insanely powerful. Now let's talk about her ultimate, because this one by far her biggest source of damage. In some team comps, her ult alone can account up to 60 to 70% of her total DPS, and at level 3 her ultimate deals 824% of her own attack as damage to all enemies, and at level 5 it goes all the way up to more than 1100%. Those numbers are crazy, but there's more. Don't let this big text scares you. In simple terms, there's basically a delayed nuke. Basically, when you use her ultimate, it applies a mark on enemies for 10 seconds. During that time, the game records all the damage your team deals to each marked enemy. But there's a cap to it though. The recorded damage can go up to 105,000% of Morgana's attack, and you cannot exceed that limit. Once that 10 seconds are over, all the sword damage explode at once, resulting in a massive nuke. Now, the important thing you need to know about this explosion, this damage does not get buffed by things like Galahad's attacks buff, crit chance, crit damage, or similar effects. It only scales of Morgana's base attack, and because of that, you really want to invest in Morgana herself. Use attack focused pets, training her, stack attack percentage through her traits and substats. Also gifts to squeeze some flat attack and some defense in HP for a bit of survivability on top of that. Just for heads up, additional damage used to boost this explosion before yesterday's maintenance, but now it no longer works. It seems to be a bug, and because of that I had to redo all of my calcs and delay posting this video. One important thing to clarify here, while her explosion doesn't scale with attack buffs mid-fight or crit, it does benefit from defense rate and defense reduction. So for example, it gets boosted by Belzy's defense reduction, and she will also benefit from any future character that apply defense shred on enemies. We will talk more about this when we get into the team comp sections. That said, her other source of damage can still be buffed normally, so buffs are not wasted on her overall kit. Another huge bonus of her ultimate, it also gives a cooldown reduction to your entire team after you use it. This makes it much easier to reach the damage cap for her explosion, and to be honest, hitting the cap isn't even that hard. It mostly depends on Morgana's attack. In many cases, she's alone can almost fill it, and if you run her with another strong DPS, reaching the cap basically is guaranteed. And finally, her active skill. Her active skill deals 372% of her own attack to all forward enemies with a very short 8 seconds cooldown. And if any enemy has one or more stack of Queen Decree, which is her mark, this skill gets even better. It reduces its remaining cooldown by 1 second and also triggers an additional hit that deals 140% of her attack 1 per cast at level 3. Her signature card gives her a 60% magic attack and 10% crit chance, and on top of that it gives her another 50% magic attack and crit damage. The downside is that it reduces her healing received by 5%. Overall, this card is really good on her, but it does make her a bit squishier in some situations, so you need to play around that. That said, she does have some very solid alternatives. Tia's card is probably the closest replacement, especially if you have her at higher dupes. The same goes for Mary's card. You can also run the generic support cards like Vivian's, Merlin's, Christina, and similar options. These work good on her, but you usually sacrificing some of Morgana's personal damage in exchange for boosting your team more. There's also Lua's card, which you can use for a really stupid skill spam build. I didn't include it in the main chart because it can be a bit misleading, but the numbers can get pretty crazy, especially if you stack attack speed on her team. But even with that, I think her card is still the best overall option and the easiest one to use if you want maximum performance. Now for dupes in Transcendence levels, as usual G3 is the biggest jump if we didn't count the training buffs. But the real sweet spot for her are Awakening and T5. At those levels, she gains a huge amount of attack percentage from Transcendence and Training combined. On top of that, she provides a 30% attack buff to all of your units, and I think it's very worth it. To put that in perspective, a fully trained fire unit only gives you around 10% attack. So yeah, Morgana's scaling and team value at higher dupes is absolutely insane. I usually don't say this, but get as many copies as possible. She's definitely worth going for, and since she's a Holly unit and Holly units in theory harder to get, this is actually your best chance to pull multiple copies when she's on rate up. So if you're planning to invest into Morgana, now is definitely the time. But if you're a new player, I would say T3 or T5 max and go spend the rest in Leon's or Lowen's pit, or also Palamedes in Lowen's banner instead. Now let's move on to builds. For trades, the ideal setup is triple 30% attack lines, and if you can get that, crit damage is also perfectly fine for her. Honestly, the difference is almost negligible, especially if you're running her at higher dupes, so don't stress it too much. Just stick with whatever good rolls you get. And for weapons, Thunderclap is still absolutely goated. You want to aim for crit damage and attack substats, and for chest piece, Holy Armor is your best option for attack percentage. But if your Morgana feels too squishy, you can swap for more defensive options like Cow Armor, Tempest, Gold Armor, and if you're a new player, Green or Red Robe are totally fine. Treasure is very simple. You mainly want crit chance in healing received, so basically all the crowns are good options. Cow Crown, Tempest, Goddess Ring, or any other crown variants. For runes, Thunderheart is still extremely strong and hard to replace. You can run Cow runes, but personally I think the Thunderheart effect is too good to miss, especially since Morgana is already a bit squishy. You can also use Goddess or Soleil runes if you want more raw attack. And for pets, her signature pet is very straightforward, 100% crit damage. It's basically a stat stick and it's mainly used for raids. So if you care about higher scores, this is definitely the pet you want to go for. And right now the meta usually revolves around these three main pets, and depending on the situation we swap Tia with Eva if we need more crit damage. We replace Luwen's pet with Eva's, especially in fight like Avalon where it's less risky. But now we have another alternative you can run, but you will lose some of crit chance, and if you decide to main it, you really need to pay attention to the buff targeting. Most of the time this buff will go to your main healer, since healers usually have very high attack, and you will need to play around that if you choose this option. Me personally on this account, I think I will max it just to make a stupid nuke build for my second team by using Phoenix, Eva, and Morgana's pets combined. Now let's talk about teams. For Morgana, there's basically two major team types. The first one is mono magic team that revolves around her, and the second one is using Morgana as a support / secondary DPS in your melee teams. Magic teams are honestly the easiest and the most comfortable way to play Morgana. They're great for star incarnations, for new players, and general PvE content. Easy to build, easy to play, and they still deal a ton of damage. You know what, let's start with magic teams first. First, you obviously want Galahad. She gives your team much needed survivability along with magic and ranged attack buffs. Her parry active skill, it helps a lot with filling Morgana's explosion stacks, especially if Morgana is your solo DPS. In that case, you want to use Arundite on Galahad. That said, personally I prefer running a secondary DPS, and Tia is perfect for that. Tia helps your max Morgana stacks much faster, clears those trash mobs in PvE, and she absolutely loves the cooldown reduction Morgana provides. And let's be honest, what's better than one mommy? Two mommies. Actually three, because we also want Hysteria. Hysteria gives your team more magic attack, makes enemies take more damage by guaranteeing additional damage to magic carries, and her fear application helps a lot with Morgana's survivability too. On top of that, she deals a very respectable amount of DPS herself. So you want to start, for example, with Hysteria to nuke the first phase, then Tia to clear phase 2 trash mobs, then let Morgana delete the final boss with her explosion. And for the last slot, you will definitely need a healer or defensive support. You can use Rhea for attack buffs, crit damage and healing, or Eren's buff and for shields, or you can also use Neobedi for root, healing, and crit buffs. All of these work, and it depending on the content, you can also take out Hysteria and put 2 supports instead, and if you want, you can also take Tia for Eva, for example, and so on. Now, for the second team types is slotting Morgana into your melee teams. Morgana actually works really well here because melee DPS units love the cooldown reductions, and Morgana loves teammates who can max her witch stacks quickly. And usually these types of teams have really high damage ceiling. The problem is she becomes really vulnerable and very squishy in these teams. To make this work, you need a really good gear and stats, which is why they set up mostly for endgame content. The strongest overall version of this team uses Palamedes. She's absolutely love the active skill cooldown reduction, and the same goes for Belzy. And it's not just for that, Morgana also wants Belzy because of her explosion nuke benefits massively from the defense shred, and also the stun gives her some time to recover a bit. And for the last slot, Dian is basically mandatory here. And if Palamedes doesn't work for your situation, you can also swap her out for Luen, for example. You can also replace Biddy if you want with Galahad to try a hybrid magic melee team with more survivability. Now, should you pull Morgana? Definitely. And if you're new here or don't really know me, I usually value supports more than pure DPS units. And for the longest time, before the new generation of carries, Tia was the only exception for this rule because she was, and to be honest, she's still easy to use. Her skill spam delete trash mobs, and she works almost in every PvE content, and her damage is still very high. But with Morgana now in the game, I genuinely think she's overtanking Tia. And that's not just because of her damage, it's because of her supporting powers and the cooldown reductions and how easy she is to slot in almost any team you want to play. So yeah, I would say she's a must pull. My advice is to get as many copies as you reasonably can, but don't feel rushed and don't feel pressured to spend money. The game is pretty generous, and if I remember correctly, we're supposed to get around 300 pulls during this event. So hopefully you will be able to get a lot of copies of her naturally. The attack buff she provides from training is insanely valuable, so she's worth awakening in my opinion, not just for Morgana herself, but for all your other units as well, so make sure to train her down the line. And if you're unlucky like me, you can always use your selectors later to finish her dupes and train her properly. Just don't use them now. I used my 3 selectors for her T5, and after that I did 110 pull, and guess what? I got 3 copies, and trust me, it really hurts more than hitting hard pity. And as for her pit, it's nice to have if you care about high red scores. Otherwise, I'd recommend prioritizing her dupes in card first, and only after that I will still recommend getting Dian copies first if you don't have her already, and then Luen's pit, and after that Palamedes and Luen after that, and then if you want you can max out Eva or get Morgana's pit in that order. And yeah, that's pretty much it for this video. I hope this guide helped you out even if it's a bit late, and if it did, please make sure to leave a like and subscribe to my channel. It really helps me out. And thank you guys for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one. Bye.